In a world filled with intergalactic space battles, metahuman destruction on a global scale, and psychopathic serial hauntings, there's only one team who can make sense of it all. When your world is overrun with rampant pop culture, call Loop and Larry, Guardians of Geeks.
Yeah!
Well, it's been a while since we've been here, so we had to
Oh my God.
hold it up again. You know, why wouldn't we? Because this is what we do now.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we do. I'm Loop.
And I'm Larry.
And this is Guardians of Geek. And yeah, it's been since the Oscar podcast was the last podcast we've done.
Yeah, we really got to put our lives together, so we prioritize
my
this
God.
podcast. I don't know what's going on.
Well, it got really busy really quickly, I found, like after that. Like it's just regular things going on in life, and all of a sudden it's like super busy. So I'm glad that we were able to get back together.
Summer's coming up, things will slow down a little bit. You know, we'll go back to podcasting 100% of the time. Don't worry.
Yes, that's right. We'll get her done. We'll get her done. So we're coming off a long weekend, and Doctor Strange, I think the first big summer movie of the year, was number one at the box office again. It's made over $800,000 worldwide so far. So you saw it. 800 million. Sorry, a million, not just 800. Yeah, $800,000.
It's made just under $1,000.
I'm not good with numbers. Let's put it that way.
No.
So I've seen it twice, and you've seen it once. So what are your just general thoughts of this movie?
I loved this movie. I thought it was amazing, and part of what I loved about it was that it felt to me like quite a departure from the normal Marvel type movies. Like it felt very Marvel. Like it felt almost sort of Guardians of the Galaxy kind of Marvel. But then the horror elements, like the Sam Raimi stuff, just for me. Like there were so many. Like you could, if you know Sam Raimi's work, his Evil Dead and all of the horror history, you could totally see it coming through in this. Like there were scenes that looked like they were pulled right from the original Evil Dead, and it felt so nostalgic that way. But I just thought it was great. It was so much fun. How about you?
I loved it. Like the whole scene with Doctor Strange when he's the zombie. And he has all those demons as a cloak. Like that is so Sam Raimi. Like it just looks so cool. I love this movie. I thought it was great. I mean, the bar gets set higher for these Marvel movies on each one that comes out. And the Spider-Man one with Doctor Strange in it was pretty high. And then this one I thought was as good, if not surpassed it. It was so much happening. I had to see it twice. Like I couldn't take it all in one viewing, but I'm a little afraid the bar is going to get a little high. And the only other thing I'm afraid of is it's a little confusing. Like it's getting a little with the multiverse stuff. It's getting a little bit out there, but still, I think it's awesome.
Yeah, this phase is really interesting because like the original first 22 movies, whatever it was, were pretty straightforward. Like I mean, they're like grounded in like Earth. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, there was obviously aliens, Guardians, and things like that, but the heroes were, you know, your Iron Man, your Hulk, and they're all sort of New York based. You know what I mean? But now it feels like they're really moving into outer space and interdimensions, and like it really is a totally different feel for this phase of Marvel, which is kind of cool. I mean, you don't want to get stale and have every movie take place in New York City. But yeah, it is, you really do have to start paying attention now. And the fact that like this one really played off of WandaVision. Like if you hadn't seen WandaVision, this would be a tough movie to understand. Like this one you really needed to watch the TV side of it. Like in the first phases, you had to watch each of the movies in the theater or at home or wherever. But now you actually have to pay attention to what's going on Disney Plus in order to understand the movie in the theater.
It's just so layered with everything going on, and there's a lot of characters now. Like I mean, they've introduced a few characters in this movie, like America Chavez and stuff, but the who is actually one of the Young Avengers, so that's all coming together with Kate Bishop and everything from the other shows. So like, and even Wanda's kids are in Young Avengers as well. So it just keeps layering and layering, and I'm like, oh my god, how many characters are there going to be like in these movies? Like it just keeps going and going. So I don't know. This was great. I loved it. It's a great, like, it's a kind of movie you have to see at the theater to me. Like it's just so big. It's just such a big film. So I saw it in 3D and I saw it in 2D. So
so what was your? I would really like to see it in 3D. What was that like?
I thought 3D was dead. I didn't realize it was still a thing. So, and so I was surprised when it was like when I went to go, and that was my only option was 3D. So it was fine. I find if you have glasses, it's not a great experience. Like, you know what I mean? Because you have to put them over your glasses, and this is kind of weird. Like, they need flip downs for the 3D flip downs. Is that a thing? Little clip-ons you can put on there. I don't know. It's like, but no, it was cool. It was good. I liked it. But it looked cool in 3D. Like it did. Like there was some cool stuff, but I enjoyed it as much in 2D. It didn't really matter.
The one thing I wanted to ask you about, because you're a much bigger Marvel fan than I am, and you go way deeper into the comics and the characters and stuff. I'm noticing now with this phase of Marvel that they're starting to not even introduce, but have a lot of background characters who are obviously, like, for people who know, they're obviously like characters you'd be like, oh, there's that dude there, because they like focus on them, or they're like for example in the Doctor Strange movie, there was a character who had the head of a bull and had horns, but he didn't really play a part. He was just sort of a background character who they focused on. Obviously he's somebody, but not being like a big Marvel person and the comics, I didn't know who it was. But I can imagine for somebody like you'd be like, oh, there's Bullhead.
Yeah, Bullhead. I wasn't sure who that was supposed to be honest. Like in the comic, there's like a bull that helps bring up Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. So I thought maybe they were trying to bring that all together. I wasn't sure that bull character was. What I freaked out was in the Illuminati. Like I completely lost my mind because number one, like they had the Mr. Fantastic was in it. They brought back with the music as well, Professor X. Like I loved when they had that music from the 97 cartoon, which I just finished watching, which is really cool. So that was cool. And the thing I laughed the most at was Black Bolt, because it was the same actor that's on the series when they did the Inhumans.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that's the same guy. And it was I think it's Anson something. He's on the new Star Trek Brave New Worlds, I think it's called, or I think that's what it is. But anyways, he's in that show, and he plays Captain Pike. But I'm like, is that the same guy? And then I'm like, oh my god, it is. It's the same guy from the Inhumans. And that show bombed. Like the Inhumans completely bombed, but it's the same guy playing Black Bolt in both. And I'm like, that attention to detail is like, it was awesome. I thought that was amazing.
That's what's so cool about Marvel is they do little things like that. Like in Endgame, when they were at Tony Stark's funeral and they panned around and they brought back that kid from Iron Man 3 who people had totally forgotten about, but they brought back the exact same actor. Now he's an adult just to be in that scene. And you're like, that's just awesome. Like that's sort of
no mention so cool. He doesn't say anything. He's just there. Like
and for people who pay attention, you're like, oh my gosh, that's those are the things that make those movies so good. Is just
that whole scene was like so cool. Like it just had so many characters, and then the fact they brought back Captain Carter from What If and everything else. Like it was just so well done. It was so well done. I'm like, oh my god, it's just layered and layered with like little tidbits and like things. I was like, oh, it's great.
And again, you had to have watched What If to understand the backstory of Captain Carter. Like,
or even like know she existed. Like and really get into it.
Like they really do reward you for watching. It's cool.
The fact that like Monica Rambeau's mom was actually Captain Marvel, like that was so cool. Like it was just so well done. But when I knew Patrick Stewart was going to be in it, and I knew he was going to be playing him. But when you actually see him, and he's in the yellow like vehicle that he has from the cartoon, I was like, oh my god, this is so good, so good.
Yep, it was a winner. 100%.
Yeah, it was awesome. So other than that, there's been a lot of other like I can't believe how much TV there is and how much TV's coming back. And like the list is like I forgot the other day they're doing like a Lord of the Rings show. Like I remember the trailer, but then I just got reminded again the other day. I'm like, oh my god, and Game of Thrones. Like,
this is going to be the geekiest year for television that we've had in a long time. Like we've got Stranger Things, we've got all of these shows that have been pushed like that were supposed to sort of come back over, you know, the last couple of years, but with the pandemic and whatever, they've been delayed. Everything is now, it's like they're dumping the bucket of shows, and we're getting everything all at once. It's awesome. And don't forget the new Avatar. Oh
no.
Okay.
That nothing annoyed me more than having that Avatar. I cannot stand Avatar. I just don't.
You really don't.
I don't know what it is about it. I just think it's like, the first movie like looked good, like it was like the first time they had done that type of 3D. You know, that was cool, but the story was terrible. Those characters are terrible looking. Like it's just, I don't. It's just nothing about it appeals to me. But I watched that trailer and I'm like, meh. It's like,
what about Sigourney Weaver smoking? Aren't you looking forward to seeing that?
I'm in.
Okay, good.
So TV side, what are we watching right now? And I'm gonna go out and say this might be my favorite show of the year so far. Is Severance.
This is what I'm hearing. I've only watched the first episode, so give us your take on it, but don't spoil anything because
I guess it's just, it's so The Prisoner meets David Lynch meets Lost. That's how I describe it. Like it's just such an odd looking, like it's so cool looking show. Like the style's so cool. And then on top of that, just it's one of those shows where the characters are kind of like stilted. Like there's something about them you just don't like. No one talks in a regular sort of pattern that you would normally talk in. Yeah. And it's just so good. And there's just so many questions that need to be answered. Like as the show goes on, you're like, what's going on and what's happening and who's doing what? And it's so good. It's so good.
So okay, without giving any spoilers, because I am watching and I haven't watched the end. We have a joint friend. Her name is Nora, and she posted after she finished watching Severance that this was the first show she had ever watched where she wanted to scream and yell at the TV at the end of the finale. Now, don't tell me what happens, but did you feel like that too? Like,
yeah, the finale answers a lot of questions, but then it adds a lot of like questions. So it's but there's some stuff you're like.
Was it good? Was it a good finale?
Oh my God. It's this series. If you like, you've got to watch this series. Like it's just the first couple episodes, you're like, what is going on? It's hard to, because it's so weird. You're trying to figure out how it all places. But as it goes on, you start to like figure little tiny things out. And then but it's still, there's so many questions, but it's so cool.
I love it.
Yeah, it's so good. Right, and just the style of it is so cool. That's what I love about it. Like it's so stark white at times. And then like when they're working, and it's just, it's so good. It's so good.
All right. Well, I'll go the exact opposite route with the show that that I was watching. This is the first show in a very long time that I couldn't finish. And not because I didn't want to, like let's say The Dark Crystal, because I did want to finish that one. But I still haven't. But this one I did not. I just couldn't finish. Okay. And it's too bad because I was really looking forward to it. It was Mike Myers' return to comedy in his So I Married an Axe Murderer spin-off show called the Pentaverate. And I was like, this is going to be hilarious because I love So You Married an Axe Murderer. I think it's still a really funny movie. And some of the funniest stuff in that movie is when he's with his father, who he plays himself, who's a Scottish guy who totally firmly believes that the world is run by the Pentaverate, these 5 individuals who run the whole world, and it's such a funny scene in the movie, the original movie. So I thought this is going to be really funny. It is so bad.
I know, and I'm gonna watch the whole thing because they're only about half-hour episodes. I think there's 6. I've watched the first one, and there has been, if you're Canadian, there's some there are some like semi-funny Canadian references, but the problem is there's a lot of Canadian references that are like just they're already beaten to the ground in comedy, like, and I'm like, I don't know if he's doing that for an American audience, but
I don't know, but I feel like even American audiences would have heard those same jokes 1,000 times already. Like there's so this was my problem with it, is that the whole show feels dated. Like all it does. First of all, it's Mike Myers playing like 8 different characters, which he did in Austin Powers. He did in So I Married an Axe Murderer. Like he's done that.
Yeah. Like, but on top of that, none of them are funny. So go on.
None of them are good. And all of the jokes and the way he delivers the jokes are exactly the same way he delivered them in the 90s with Austin Powers and all of his stuff that he did. Like I even went back and rewatched Wayne's World, and it was the same sort of delivery back in the 90s, which was new and fresh and made all those movies fun, but it's exactly the same now. So it just feels like way out of date. Like this is not the kind of comedy that is acceptable now. Do you know what I mean? Like that is funny now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, did you forget to move on?
I think the basis of a show like that for him, the thing is, some of the characters are like he does a good job at making all the characters seem different.
Yes.
And I love the idea of it. Like, and the look of it's actually pretty cool. Like, it's got this sort of culty, like Illuminati sort of feel to it, which is kind of cool. Like, so there's some elements of it I do like. I like the idea of the reporter trying to, this is the story he's going to latch on to. And there are some funny Canadian sort of references for us. The problem with this movie is with an Austin Powers and Dr. Evil are funny characters. Yes. So the other ones may not are kind of one note, but they elevate because those two characters are so funny. There's not a character that's really super funny to latch onto. No. And I think that's part of the problem. Like the reporter's almost a little bit sad, it's like in a way, but he's not funny like an Austin Powers is, and it's just missing something there. Like there's something just not in it that needs to be in it. Like I like is it Keegan Michael Key? Is that the
yes? Yeah.
Like he in the first episode he's pretty good. I think they need a few more comedians to kind of fill out some of those roles. Yeah, and
just better writing. Like it's just the acting, like you said, the acting's not bad. The portrayal of the characters isn't bad, but it's just the material is just old. It just feels like
it feels old.
Yeah, it's just really weird.
Like the story's kind of cool, but it just kind of feels like in some of the stuff there was a couple of lines I thought were kind of funny and a couple of references, but like this isn't the first episode, but there's this whole thing where he's like, Canadians see the States a little clearer. Like that's his sort of idea. And I understand what he's saying. Like everything seems bigger in the States and brighter for us as Canadians. But so he shoots all the stuff in Canada in standard
4:3, and better, like square, like old-fashioned TV.
And it's a little bit grainy looking, and as soon as he goes to the States, because it's kind of making fun of the quality of some of the stuff that we would produce versus the American stuff, like based on our budgets and things. And then as soon as they go across the border, it goes into like letterbox and it looks all beautiful. And I thought that's kind of a neat idea, but it's a lot to get to that one joke. You know what I mean? Like it was just sort of like we had to sit and watch a standard look for like the whole show till we finally got to a letterbox, like proper looking show. I don't know.
And part of the problem with that is that it bugged me that every time they'd cut back to until we found out what the gag was, every time they cut back to the reporter, it was square and it made it look like it was being shot in the 70s or 80s. But then they'd cut to the Pentaverate and it'd be full screen. And I'm like, so what time period is this?
Yeah, that's the problem, because when he had it in that section, it looked like it was supposed to be in the 80s. And I'm like, and the way he's dressed too as the reporter looks very 80s-ish. I know he's a little bit out of date because he's been in news for so long. But I was like, this must be in the 80s. But then she grabs a cell phone at one point and I'm like, no, that's not in the 80s. This is like now. So that kind of confused me more than anything.
It was not. Yeah, it just wasn't. It by the time like the gag didn't pay off. It didn't make you go, oh, I see what it, because you were so annoyed by it up to that point. It was just like, really? That was why you.
I think I don't mind him playing multiple characters. Just focus on 2 or 3. And then use other actors and comedians that we know, even if they're Canadian, to play. Like he plays that guy that drives them. He's kind of like a bit of a stoner. He's like sort of into conspiracies and things. That could have been like anybody else. What I mean? And it just like, I just feel like they're use the strengths of other people that are like other Canadians that are good actors and funny comedians that we know that like, that would have been a great Seth Rogen character.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like it would have fit his brand. It would have been funny, but I think it was just a little too much Mike Myers, and spread too thin.
Yeah, it totally felt like the Mike Myers show. Like it felt like I want to do a show and I want to be starring in it and I want to be all like everybody and this is my show and it's, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
It just felt a little bit ego-centered.
And I love Mike Myers, and it's like
yeah.
I applaud him for trying something like this. Like it does look great, like it looks cool, but I feel like it's a little, it does feel dated, and I don't know what it is. I haven't seen the whole series. Maybe the rest of the series is brilliant. I'll finish it just so I can watch it, and then I can have it as my worst show of the year when it comes to the end of the year.
That might be just so we can agree on that.
Right now, after the first episode, it's a bit of a contender. I'm not saying, but
I'm 2 episodes in, and it's still there for me. So yeah, eventually, but I'll definitely do Severance before I finish the Pentaverate.
Yeah, I just have one more. I'm not going to review it or anything. I'm just going to throw it in. There's the Kids in the Hall series. They're new.
Oh yeah, I haven't watched that yet.
They're new. It's great. If you like Kids in the Hall, I loved it. I thought it's fantastic. It's so fun to watch them back again together. But that's all I'm going to say about it. But if you're a fan of sketch, and there's also on there as well a 2-part documentary on the Kids in the Hall as well.
Like the original, like the original Kids, like the history of them?
It follows them from like right up into the new show. So it follows them from like when they were just doing like improv on stages before they were even a troupe, and they're all in it talking about how they all got together, and the infighting and little other things I had no clue about. But it goes through their whole history, all 5 seasons. It goes through their Death Comes to Town and Brain Candy and how Brain Candy bombed. And like, it was like, it's great. It's great. Mike Myers is in that. That's what made me remind me of it. Because he's one of the talking heads in it, talking about them. And there's footage of him performing, like doing improv with the Kids in the Hall back before they were anything. So which is really cool. So yeah, it's really fun. So if you're a fan of Kids in the Hall at all, it's worth seeing.
So what you're saying is there are a lot more shows that we should be watching before we finish the Pentaverate.
Yes, I would put all these other shows first, and then
maybe if you have time, maybe, and it's
maybe fit that in.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of shows I'm not sure of, we've got the Pop Capacitor coming up.
Awesome.
Welcome back to the Pop Capacitor, Loop and Larry. And now we're going to look at a movie that came out in 1981, an animated movie. You can see it right behind Larry right now. It's Heavy Metal. I don't even know how we picked this. I have no idea where this came from.
Here's how we picked it. Just a couple of weeks before we're recording this podcast, it was released for the first time in 4K.
Oh, okay, that's right.
In a beautiful steelbook version, because I'm all about the steelbooks, but in 4K. So it's getting like a new life. So I thought, now's the time to talk about it, because the buzz is back out there. People are talking about heavy metal because it's been so long, but now it's
people are talking about it.
They are on the street. I was walking downtown the other day, and all I heard was heavy metal. Did you hear it's out on 4K?
Just everywhere you look. I don't think that ever happened. I don't know.
Oh, it might have. I don't know.
Okay, well, in your imagination. So heavy metal, 1981. It's based on the Heavy Metal magazine, which if you didn't, as a kid, all I knew is it was like a comic that had nudity. That's all I knew about it. And it was fantasy sci-fi based. I don't think I've ever actually looked at an issue of it.
No.
I might have flipped through one in a store, but it was that was sort of the thing at the time. Was like, it was so risque as a kid, because it was like, oh my god, there's like nudity in this comic book. So it seems so unobtainable as a kid, right? Like it was almost like a Playboy in a way.
Yes.
So this came out, it budgeted over $9 million, and it grossed 546,000.
A bit of a loss right there.
Not great. That doesn't include home video. That just includes just the movie itself. But I remember at the time it came out, I didn't see it till years later, because obviously I was like 10, I think, when that movie came out. I don't know when I saw it. Maybe it was 13 or 14, or I'm not sure. But
I remember renting it back in the day when you had to also rent your VHS player. So we rented a VHS player, and then that was one of the ones on the shelf. So I think I was probably 14 or 15 by the time I watched it. So at least 4 or 5 years after it came out is when I first saw it. So
speaking of VHSs, my dad bought one of the first ones of anyone I knew, and it was $1,500. you had to buy $100 membership at the place in order to rent movies, and you got your first 3 movies free.
Oh, well, it's got 3 movies free for $100.
Bucks. God,
$1,500 in the early 80s would be equivalent to like $3,000 now. I mean, like
it was a top loader too, so that top part came up, you shoved it in and then slammed it down.
But this was one of those movies that I think once kids realized you could rent it, it was like it became a staple, because I seem to remember renting it a couple of times.
I remember at the time. I haven't seen it in years until we decided to do it. Like, it's been a while, so it was interesting to rewatch it again with like different eyes. So because some things I liken it to like a Cheech and Chong movie. Like, at the time when I was a kid, Cheech and Chong seems so funny, and I watch it now and I'm like, it's like the comedy's not that great. I find they're great performers, but the comedy itself is a little juvenile, like, you know what I mean? For nowadays as an adult. But at the time I used to think it was hilarious, and I don't even know if I knew what I was laughing at. I think I was just laughing because it seemed like it should be funny. Like, so that'll be our next pop capacitor, every Cheech and Chong movie.
Cheech and Chong. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think there were a couple of big draws for this movie. One of them was the music, because it literally has a heavy metal. I mean, I don't know if I'd call it heavy metal. Like, Journey is one of the songs that play. So it's not all heavy metal, but it was contemporary, like hard rock kind of, rock and roll, which was cool. Like, it's got a really cool soundtrack. And it's funny because now looking back on it, I recognize some of the songs, but I have no idea who the artists are. Like, there are a couple of artists I'm like, I don't even know who that is anymore. It's like they had one hit. But so there was that, and then the fact that it was an animated movie with nudity and violence. Yeah,
like an adult animated movie, which was kind of cool. Well, let's go through our hits and misses on this. And it is one's a little different because this is actually like sort of an anthology. It's not one linear story. It's got like a kind of a story, an overlapping story that kind of fills in between all the other sort of mini stories that have to have something to do with the main story. But let's just start with our hits and misses. So I'll let you go first and see what you've got.
Well, I'll start with the hit, because I actually really like this movie a lot. So I've got a few. And for me, one of the biggest hits is how inspirational this movie became to future things. So right off the top of the movie, there's a scene where a car is floating through space. Like, an astronaut is up in space, and he launches out of his spaceship in a car, and I can't even remember right now what type of car it is. But
it's like a convertible of some sort.
Yeah, it's a convertible, classic convertible. But anyway, and he's floating through space. But that, I seem to recall, was the inspiration for the MTV. Remember the MTV astronaut was in a car at one point, and then Elon Musk shot a car, like almost the same kind of car with a mannequin of an astronaut into space, and it's literally floating in space. It was the same sort of car, but it was quite obviously influenced by this movie. So I thought that was kind of cool. I also feel like, and I don't have anything backing this up, but I feel like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, with the soundtracks that they use, having that 70s kind of rock and roll, is very much what this movie feels like. Now, I don't know if the original Guardians comic books made reference to like rock music from the era. I don't know if you know that.
I don't know.
But it feels like that, like the fact that it's, super cool and in space, but the soundtrack is like 70s, 80s, like hard rock. It felt like there might have been some influence there. The other influence, I thought, and now I didn't check this either, so the timing might be a little bit off, but He-Man and She-Ra, the cartoons.
Yep.
If you look behind me, the character that they have behind me, at one point she holds a sword up, and she doesn't say I have the power, but she holds the sword up, and it like lightning comes down into the sword and gives her like this strength and ability, very much like what He-Man and She-Ra do. Now I can't remember whether He-Man and She-Ra came out before this or after this, but it was
it was after this. It was like 84 or something.
That's what I thought. So I feel like that whole holding the sword with the lightning hitting it and giving them the power sort of came from this too. I just feel like a lot of filmmakers sort of looked at this and said, there's a lot of really cool stuff going on here that we should make use of.
That car was a 59 Chevy Corvette.
That's right.
That's what the type of so in the movie, just to give a really brief synopsis, this astronaut that comes from the car has this green orb, and this orb is like this evil I can't remember what they call it, but there's a name. Lochnar. The Lochnar. It's the ultimate evil or whatever. And so it tells the story to this girl after it kills the astronaut. It tells the story to this girl in the house. All these separate stories that you'll see throughout the movie, basically.
About evil, like about because this is like this is concentrated pure evil, this ball of light. And so it's telling the story about how it influenced all of these people to do evil. That's essentially what the movie is about. It's not really about heavy metal, it's about this Lochnar.
Other than heavy metal is more like that's the magazine basically that it was based on. So one of my hits is the soundtrack to this, and you talked about it earlier, but like Sammy Hagar, Devo, Blue Oyster Cult, Journey, Cheap Trick, Black Sabbath, like it was they knew what they were doing when they put this together. What they didn't know what they were doing was that they signed the music rights to just the movie itself, the theatrical release, and I believe the LP, but they didn't for anything else. So for future releases of it, they had to renegotiate everything again because the kind of like a WKRP kind of there it is. It kind of got into the same issues music wise. That's why the shows took so long to come out, because they didn't have the music rights in perpetuity for all these like scenes. So the CD didn't come out to like 95 for this, because it just took that long for them to figure out all the music rights.
Back in 1981, they still weren't thinking about the home video market because it didn't exist.
It wasn't around. So
so they wouldn't have even thought to do that at the time. But that makes sense. That's why probably it's taken, 81, it's taken 40 years for like a good version of this to come to Blu-ray, a 4K version. 40 years it took.
And the music was great. I thought it really helped enhance the movie. It gave it kind of a cool factor to the movie. There's a couple times when the music was like didn't really seem to fit the scene. I found like it was just sort of played in the background for no reason. Like it didn't really like it didn't help like or add anything. But generally it was used pretty decently, and it was like it sounded great.
I totally agree. Okay, I'll go into a little bit of a miss here. And this is going to sound really odd, because this miss at the time when we were watching this movie when we were teenagers was the biggest hit of the movie. Okay. So, but now we're watching it 40 years later with different eyes, as adults, as parents, as whatever. I feel like the nudity in this movie was almost too much. Like it became gratuitous. Like there was a lot of the scenes of nudity were not necessary. Like they were there because was the magazine, and that's it was cutting edge at the time, and it was breakaway and all of that. And back at the time when we were kids, obviously that was a big draw. Like that was you never saw anything like that. But looking at it now, I'm like, it was totally like it didn't help the story at all. Like it didn't. No. It almost became a distraction, and I was like, there was no need for it. So I feel like it's, as weird as that is to say, I feel like it was too much. So.
I found that in the movie, it was like a sexualization of women at that time. Like, and you could feel it. It almost feels dirty because because it's like they're the typical. If you've ever opened up a Playboy when you were a kid, like the typical way an artist would draw a woman, like with gigantic breasts and like just ridiculously like the figure, and like it was just the whole thing. And I found like it was like a little too much in this. Like it was like, I think part of the problem they would have had, I would have bet at the time, is that would be expected. If you're going to go see heavy metal and you've read the comic, you're expecting some of that in the movie. And it was but there was like total times when it wasn't necessary, but it was there.
Again, the movie is 40 years old, so there was a different time and a different place.
It just doesn't land now at all.
So anyway, what else do you have? Do you have any more hits?
I'm not a big fan of like some of the animation in this. And I don't like, okay, like let's take the guys behind me, for instance. There's certain like in the cabbie, there's a cabbie sequence at the beginning.
Yes.
With Harry Canyon, which is like this cabbie, and he gets involved in this whole mess. It's just so, that animation is just so like dirty looking. Grimy. There's something they're grimy and dirty looking, and the characters just look so like dirty. Like I don't know what it is about it that I just it's a little bit Ralph Bakshi.
Yes.
A little bit, and a little bit of Robert Crumb.
Yeah.
Like a kind of a very product of the 70s look for animation and characters. And it was just, I had trouble in that first segment. I really struggled through the first one. Like I just was like, this is so annoying, like to look at. Like the cabbie himself was irritating to look at. Like as a character, he was so annoying. And I really struggled. Luckily, when they did this, they ended up, just to save money, apparently I was reading, they got other animation studios to do bits and like other parts of it. So there is a lot of a different look in some of the, depending which ones you watch.
So it's interesting that that's one of your misses, because the animation for me is actually one of the hits. I really like that. I'm a big fan of Ralph Bakshi. As Luke knows, we've watched a number of the Ralph Bakshi movies, and Ralph Bakshi, if you haven't heard of him, he did Fritz the Cat movies. There were a couple of those, and he did one called Heavy Traffic.
Heavy Traffic, that's it. Yeah, that's the one.
Heavy Traffic, and another one called Coonskin, and there's a number of them, and they're all pretty racy. Like this heavy metal movie probably wouldn't have happened without the Ralph Bakshi movies, because he's the one who sort of kicked off like Fritz the Cat is very, very adult. Even though it's cats that are starring in it, it's very adult. But he did
the first Lord of the Rings too.
Yes, he did. Yes, that's right. The one that combines all 3 books into one 90-minute movie.
Yes.
But I really like his style of animation, which is very dirty. Like it's very gritty and it looks very raw. And so that whole scene at the beginning with the cabbie, I actually really liked it, because to me it felt like the whole the place, the location where they were was supposed to be this super rundown, like New York slums kind of like dirty city that they lived in. So to me that like really raw feel of raw style of animation fit that grittiness and dirtiness, and it made me feel like dirty the way it should have been, because that's where they were located. So and like you said, each of the segments kind of has a different style of animation, which I thought was kind of cool, because it kept it fresh. Like you weren't watching the same, like if you didn't like that style of animation off the top, and if it was the same all the way through, it would have been hard to watch the whole thing. But I like that it did change up, and some of it became more realistic feeling, and some of it was fully cartoony. But it's all hand drawn. Like there's no CGI, it's all hand drawn, and to me it's the retro feel of it is pretty cool. So it's a hit. The animation's a hit and a miss.
They use rotoscope a lot too, or not a lot, but they use some of the rotoscope stuff in there as well, which is where you draw over real footage, right? Is that how that works? Like
that's and Ralph Bakshi, I think, might have been the one who invented that, or not invented it, but perfected it. And he used it a lot in his movies, and they did it with this one too. So the animation feels sort of like the movements feel real, and the detail feels real, but it's just it's a very weird looking animation, but I actually quite like it. I thought it was kind of cool.
That's fine. There were some segments that did look good. Like I did like the animation. Just that first one, I was like, oh no, is this all going to be this like this like creepy animation? And it was like, and it wasn't all like that. So that was good.
No, it really wasn't. But it is definitely a product of its time. Like it's a cool looking thing. It's definitely not Pixar.
No, not at all.
No, definitely not. Well, okay. What else do you have? What
I've got the voice cast. I got to give a shout out. Like,
oh yes,
because Ivan Reitman produced this movie, right? So he who did Ghostbusters, he produced it. There's like 4 SCTV alum in it that do voices. Joe Flaherty, Eugene Levy, Harold Ramis, and John Candy all do voice. And John Candy does like one major whole section of it, and then a couple voices in some of the other ones. But I thought as soon as you hear John Candy, his voice work alone added so much to that whole sequence he was part of. Like he's so good.
It's true, and his voice was like his voice was the only one that sounded like him. Like Eugene Levy, if I didn't know Eugene Levy was the voice of some of those characters, I don't think I would have known, because he can change his voice a bit to sound like different things. But John Candy sounded just like John Candy.
He did. He totally 100% like John Candy.
And which was really cool. Like it is a cool throwback. Like it gives the movie some weight. You know what I mean? To have those names in it. It's just not like a little independent movie. And the fact that Ivan Reitman made this movie too, it's a legitimate film. Like it's not a little art house movie. It's a legitimate, like with a good name, good cast, and
it's Canadian too, right? Like, isn't it a Canadian production?
I think it's considered Canadian. Yeah. So it's, I mean, it really is breakthrough for, I mean, like I said, it's not the first of its kind, because Ralph Bakshi was doing those things before he was, but he wasn't doing it with the type of cast and the type of budget and I mean, $9 million for a animated movie back in 1981, I'm sure was a lot. So they really did put a fair bit behind it, which was interesting. And the fact that they, were able to license the music and get all this is cool.
This is the last miss I have for this is, though I love the anthology format, I do like that in a lot of shows and things like that. I just, I thought this was really uneven. Like I thought some of it was uneven as far as like the type of story. Some of them didn't seem to have like an ending or a point to them. Like it was just,
I don't know that any of them actually had endings. I was thinking the same thing as I was watching it. They just sort of like would fade back into, so that like there's the ongoing, they cut back to this house where this little girl is being told by the Lochnar what's happening. So in between each segment, they cut back to the house and the Lochnar says, now I'm going to tell you this story of evil from outer space. So but they never seem to end the segments. They just kind of fade back to the house.
Something would happen, but it's not really like an ending. Like it was just sort of like, well, this part was done, and then they just sort of go like, I mean, some of them did have a definite ending, but some of them didn't seem to. They just sort of like, it was almost like, it's almost like a sketch. I just want to tell you this little piece of the story, and then that's it. But it was good. I enjoyed it. I generally enjoyed it. But did you have any other hits or misses for this?
I only have one more hit. And that was, and I don't know why they did this or how they did this, how they licensed it, but there's one quick scene of outer space, and for whatever reason, the USS Enterprise from Star Trek flies by.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
I was like, what? It's literally on screen for probably 2 seconds or 3 seconds, but it's like almost full screen, so there's no way you can miss it. It just flies by, but there's no context. It was just like, obviously somebody was a fan of Star Trek. And was like, we got to put the Enterprise in there. I didn't notice any Star Wars, other than, I mean, I guess the fact that there was a droid on one of the segments was kind of like an R2D2 or a C3PO kind of a thing, but and aliens in space. But the fact that they had the actual USS Enterprise fly by, I just thought that was a cool little nod to.
I wonder if they had to get that, if they just threw it in there, if they or if they had to actually get the permission from. Like, because I'm sure that whoever runs the Star Trek, like, I can't remember who did Star Trek. The
Gene Roddenberry.
Like that's who licenses all that stuff. I'm sure if they saw this movie, they'd be like, yeah, no, we don't want to be associated with heavy metal.
I kind of feel like that. I mean, it was definitely not on brand for Star Trek.
no, that's what I mean. Like, it'd be like, I don't think so, but
no, so I'm not really sure. And the only other nod, and again, I don't know whether this was like an actual thing, but there was in one of the segments, there was a council that had to make decisions. One of the members of the council was literally the spitting image of Doctor Strange. He had dark hair with white across. He had the goatee. He was wearing a robe, like a
Oh, that's awesome.
He there was no way that they did not steal that look from the Marvel comics. I was like, that is there's no way that's not Doctor Strange.
I'm sure there was a few things in there that we were like, that if we watched it again, you'd be like, okay, that looks like something or somebody or whichever, but that's hilarious.
But that one, I mean, maybe it was just because we had just watched the movie, so it was kind of top of mind. But after looking, I'm like, there is no way that they did not they did not copy that character.
That's hilarious.
It's kind of cool.
That's awesome. So what do you think in general, like, so with the pop capacitor, obviously we're gonna say if this stands up, if this holds up over after all these years, what are your final thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I think it's because I grew up with this movie, and there were a lot of years that I didn't see it. Seeing it again, I still really like it. I still think it's really cool, just purely for the nostalgia thing. Like I said, some of it is really inappropriate and doesn't translate to today, but for me, it still holds up. I still find it really cool. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth a watch if you haven't watched it in a while.
Yeah, I think it sits on the fence for me, but because of the influence it had, because of just to get this movie up and running and get this on the screen, I think I have to give it it's worth a watch. Like, I think it's definitely worth seeing if you've never seen it. It's like, I mean, it is a sci-fi movie, essentially fantasy sci-fi. It's in my wheelhouse. Is this kind of the stuff I like, as far as I love like fantasy and Conan and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of that in this. It's just like, again, it's hard. One thing that's like hard for me is just how animation doesn't really stand the test of time like a movie could. Like, it's just it's just because they just weren't up to the standards that they're at now, like with a Pixar movie. But I mean, it looks pretty good. Like, it looks pretty good, and they did a good job with it, I think. And it's just an odd choice of a movie to make.
Yes,
but it was like, I mean, I don't know who was like really like, oh, we got to make a heavy metal movie. Like, but I don't know. I saw it in a list of. It was an interesting list of. I can't remember what else was in it, but it was a top 10 list of movies that fans clamored to have made, and then no one went and saw it. Yeah, and I was like, oh yeah, that's true too, because there's a lot of movies like that where people are like, oh man, you got to make a sequel to this, or you got to do this, and then it comes out, and then like the Matrix, and no one goes and sees it. Like, yeah, like, but everyone's like, oh, you got to make another Matrix movie. But so that was good. That was kind of interesting.
Like, that's the thing. Like, that magazine was obviously, when it came out, geared towards adults. Like, it wasn't a kids magazine, but an animated movie is usually geared towards kids. So I'm not sure who would have gone to see it. Like, would adults in the 80s flock to a movie theater to see a cartoon? Even though there is, nudity and violence in it, would they do that? And obviously it was rated in such a way that kids couldn't go, or so I'm not really sure who the audience would have been for a movie. Like, for the magazine, I could see, because adults would buy it and take it home in the privacy of their own home, whatever. But yeah, but I think it's definitely found a cult status now. Yeah, and I'm sure that it's made its budget back over the years.
I think for me, it was like, it started like, and when I first started watching it again, I'm like, oh no, this is not going to be good. But it grew on me as the movie went on, and I enjoyed it by the end. But it was the beginning I struggled with, but that's just because it was little, like the animation, the first segment I wasn't a big fan of, but it grew on me as it went. So it's definitely worth like watching for sure. If you are into sci-fi or fantasy movies, it's definitely should be on your list.
And where did you, if people are looking for it, where did you find it?
I got it on Apple. I rented it off on Apple. Oh, okay. Or iTunes, iTunes.
Because it's not streaming anywhere. Like, we actually looked at all the streaming services. It doesn't seem to be streaming anywhere, but you can rent it from iTunes, or like we said, you can purchase the 4K steelbook, which of course I did, because
how many versions of this do you have is the question.
Well, I actually have just two. I've got the original DVD that came out, and now I have the 4K Blu-ray steelbook in this deal.
Of course you do. That's like me. I have to get it like in 18 different versions, even if I don't need it. It's just like you just have to have it. You just have to have it. You really I don't even own this movie. I'm like, I should get this movie now, even though I wasn't even that great a fan of it. But I'm like, it seems like something I need to own in my collection. So
it's a classic.
That's our pop capacitor, and again, join us on our socials. I've been putting things up on Twitter, at least, and some of the others once in a while.
Yeah, you've been doing good at that.
Yeah, I've been trying to put stuff up. So follow us, and if you have any suggestions for movies to watch, you can always do that as well. We'd always love to hear from you. And before we go, I just want to mention one more thing: that Colin Cantwell passed away. And for those that don't know him, he designed the original like Death Star and
the X-wing and the Y-wing and the TIE fighter. I believe the A-Wing. Like he was the original designer. He did all the concept art for all of most of the ships in Star Wars, as well as the Death Star. And he was actually touring, like doing Comic-Cons up until like last year, because I follow him on Instagram.
Yeah.
And he was doing fan expos, Comic-Cons up until just last year, and then he got sick a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago, and he was 90 years old. And just passed away. But if you're interested in looking at his stuff, or even purchasing, because you can purchase prints of his original concepts if you go to ColinCantwell.com, all of his prints, and they're not very expensive. You can get them like actual signed versions for like $50.
Oh, really?
Of prints, because I've looked, because I'm like,
of course you have.
Get one of these. But right now, unfortunately, I don't believe they're shipping to Canada. So if you're Canadian, unfortunately, I don't think you can get them shipped here. But anyway, it's really interesting to look at the original designs for these ships. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention it because it's like sometimes some of these people fall through the cracks, and it's like if you're a fan of Star Wars, I mean, it's like half the stuff that we remember from that is he helped design. So I think that's or did design. So I think that's awesome. I just want to give one last shout out to a couple of cons. We went to a con ourselves, like one of the first cons of the year that we've been to. That's kind of gives me the feeling like the cons are back.
We went to we got a chance to go see Shockstock in London. It's London's biggest horror convention, and they've had to postpone, obviously, so we went to it this year, and it just felt like going home, being with the con family. It was so great to be back, and that was awesome, which means things are coming up, and in the next couple of weeks, we're going, and actually about 2 weeks, we're going to be at the Niagara Falls Comic-Con.
That's going to be
a big one. So
the celebrities are back. I just want to give a quick shout out to Deep River Geek Fest, who are friends of the show, and they had a great weekend. It was just this past weekend, and they did really well. So that's awesome. People are wanting to go back out now and be entertained and be part of the geek community and see everybody they know. And Niagara Falls Comic-Con coming up. I'm super excited. We'll be at that, and we'll have some stuff from that as well. So excellent. So I guess that's it for the show. We've done it. We've done the heavy metal. We've heavy metaled it. We've done everything we can do.
we might, our next show might involve more flying ships. I'm just going to put that out there. I don't want to give anything away, but it's
all right. Don't give anything away. Don't give anything away.
It's possible that we might talk about flying ships. I don't know.
People will look it up and go, okay, I know what they're doing. Right? Well, that's it for us. Thanks for watching Loop and Larry, Guardians of Geek. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Produced by Matthew C. Loop and Lawrence Simner. A Loop and Larry production.
Bueller.
He likes it. Hey, Mikey.
Bueller.
Bad news. Fog is getting thicker.
And Leon's getting larger.
Inconceivable.
Brian's right. It's an elf.
Wax on.
Does Barry Manilow know that you raid his wardrobe?
Oh, Captain, my Captain.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Wax off.